Okay, we are going live. Whoever's brave enough to show up on video, you are always welcome. Dave is here, newest addition to the team.
Hey,
Right next to
buddy.
Dave, which
The
that's
Dave,
just the
it's the
universe
Dave
talking
section.
right there.
Awesome.
Dave, hey, I had no idea you're going to show up to this. Dave, if you don't mind, man, let me throw you over the mic to super embarrass you. Would you mind taking 10 seconds to introduce yourself? We just started working together, newest addition to the Atikan team. So Jack, be nice. Um, Dave, let's give you the mic, buddy.
Yeah, pleasure to meet everybody. Based out here in Philadelphia, known Wes for a number of years now, and finally made the jump over recently just to put full trust and faith into him to take care of me and the family. I do executive and team retreats, so most of my work is like kind of C-suite teams, taking them out on mountain treks, helping them get out of their own way and be able to be better collaborators and partners for their businesses. So excited to get a little bit of to join a good team here. So looking forward to learning and meeting everybody.
Awesome.
Nice.
Great
Welcome,
intro.
Dave.
That's a great elevator pitch. I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice to meet you, Dave.
Yeah. And Dave, you're lucky Stacy's not on video because she'll put you through the ringer, the gauntlet of what do they call it? What do fraternities do? It's hazing. Hazing. All right, let's jump in here and make this nice and efficient for everybody today. Number one, happy holiday season. Number two, it's cool time, obviously, to reflect on the past year. So why don't we jump into that? I think what a lot of people forget is as we look at financial charts, right? One of the mistakes that we as wealth managers do is like, oh, the averages show this, right? They show, and what we've talked about before is averages are great for efficient conversation, but where there might be a downfall to averages is they smooth out a lot of choppiness. And the example I always give is like, okay, well, if you put your hand in boiling water, your left hand in boiling water, you put your right hand in freezing cold water, the average is nice and like bath water, but it's not a good experience. But unfortunately, investing comes with its trials, its tribulations, its difficulties. And all of you guys, I got to thank you so much because all of you on this call have gotten through those. In hindsight, the punctuation mark on 2025, at least year to date, is great, but it was hard. And the thing is, it's hard every single year.
I think it's interesting how big of a headline tariffs were and how little I've heard of them in the past, I don't know, 3 months. I mean, Wes, when's the last time a client's asked you specifically a question about tariffs?
Yeah, easily 2 months.
Yeah, right. And I think we're not so far removed as investors that we can actually remember what it felt like. The first quarter of the year, let's say, it bottomed out in April. I recall having many hardcore conversations, good conversations, scared conversations, productive conversations about the state of markets and where things are and what tariffs are and how they can influence your portfolio or how they can impact your retirement or what it might do to the economy in the short or medium term. But I think that's probably the best example in 2025 of how a headline can influence our actions, our behavior, in possibly a very destructive and negative way. And again, I think the same person's, I said this story last time. We have a client who I believe is on this call who told me someone close to him pulled out in April of the markets and never got back in. Right. So we're only a few degrees removed from many people out there. Whether you ate Thanksgiving dinner together or you talk to them at the water cooler at work or, their friends or people that you do hobbies or sports with in your free time, who have made poor decisions based on media headlines. And I think 2025, the punchline to that one was definitely the tariffs. I don't know if this is exactly market commentary or investing commentary, but I think another thing that was positive in 2025 that might not be extremely finance related, but was a similar topic like tariffs for a while was wars and how many of them have been muted this year. Although we still have some ongoing, right? I think obviously we had a military operation in the Middle East this year that seems like a distant memory, but really wasn't. and a lot of people thinking that those actions were going to drag us into World War III. And, here we are just a handful of months removed from that, and, no World War III, thank God. Right. So that's another one that, has probably popped up many of times over the course of our clients' investing careers, professional careers. There's always a threat of war being a hamper to progress. And, fortunately, in 2025, we did not accelerate that temptation, that, scary headline.
Yeah, I think, and I'll bring up this chart here for you guys. Colin, you sent over a phenomenal chart. Let me just find it real quick for you guys. Wealth building, as we say, takes work. It's difficult. Oftentimes emotional work, self-work, and really it's our job to help you understand what you're actually investing in, like understand the macro level, but then also understand the micro level, which we'll get into in a couple minutes here. But if we look at this chart, it's really fascinating. And David, I'd like you, as always, David is such a great sport. How we're going to show you the past 40 years of data, S&P 500, simplified chart of just, okay, red and green, pretty binary. How many years do you think were negative in the S&P 500 over these 40 years? If you had to guess. So point to point, at the end of the year, market's down. How many out of 40?
Are you showing a chart or not?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Oh,
Not
okay.
gonna make it easy
So
on
out
you,
of the
dude.
last 40, how many years was it down? You're talking about like by the end of the year from the like January 1st?
Yes, sir. That's the chart, right, Colin? That's the
Yep.
data set?
Yep.
Yeah.
Of those 40 years, I would say roughly, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7, something like that.
All right. So let's see if David makes me look bad. He always gives like pretty accurate answers,
Yeah, he
which
really
kind of
does.
ruins the grand finale. I gotta start asking somebody
Hey,
else.
I've been trained by you guys. You've taught
Well,
me all this stuff.
Oh, there
You're
you go.
spot
All
on,
right.
man.
Look at that. Devin.
You know what?
You
Yeah,
nailed
I'm
it.
gonna decide. We're gonna ask you every time now. I agree.
Oh, shit.
All right. So this is really fascinating, and I've now been working in finance for 20 years, and I still love these types of charts because oftentimes, as technicians, we can get lost in the data. I mean, the data is infinite. So to see high level dashboarding data like this is helpful for me, honestly, in my own personal investments. Like, oh, okay. So if we combine this with psychology, it's so many times where we let our perceptions dictate our behavior in investing. And we'll say things like, oh my gosh, well, yeah, I'm going to let it ride. Well, saying I let it ride implies that it's gambling, right? And implies that almost like that's a coin flip. It's like, okay, real quick, let's actually look at the actual data. Now, I'm also totally aware of the comment of like, oh, well, you can't let historical precedents, right, like equal like future prediction. I want to zoom in on that comment real quick. Actually, let me get on the soapbox real quick. The problem with that is, right, these are not just random investments that go up and down with the blowing of the wind. At the origin of these are companies that are selling goods and services intentionally. So to pretend like every day you just have to wake up and history doesn't exist is foolish. I'm also not saying be reckless, but understand that there's mechanisms behind these things, which we'll go a deeper dive into Apple Computer here in a little bit, so you can actually get a tangible feel for what's at the nucleus of these investments. So anyway, let's go back here. Let me share this with you. Okay, Colin, what's your take on this, man?
Well, a lot more. So perfect color scheme for the holidays. That's my first take.
On brand.
Right? Little red and green here, but overwhelmingly green. And this is where we always reiterate your long-term investment portfolio will get the results, assuming we have the long term, right? That said, you can see the spots of red, right? And that's what we plan against. I think though, but before I kind of double click on that, the overwhelming evidence shows us that the index, the market as a whole, is far more positive than negative. But something that always comes back to me when I look at some data like this is, well, why is the rhetoric or the conversation so disproportionately imbalanced to the data? almost to the person, especially before we meet them, or maybe in the first the first hour or two of meeting them, we will get some sort of narrative or some sort of story from them on how the stock market is risky, right? And I think Wes just kind of mentioned we're gonna disassociate stock market and actual like business here in just a second when we look at Apple Computer. That said, this is just a data capture of the market as a whole, broken down by year over the last 40 years. There is so much more green than red. However, our fears are all anchored to those seven down years, right? Those seven negative years. So why am I bringing this up? Why are we talking about this? You have to be very careful when you sit down at the dinner table for the holidays coming up, and you have a brother-in-law that tells you, oh, I don't invest in stocks because they're risky, or I lost everything in 2008, or whatever negative narrative that they want to insert. This is not my opinion. This is actually the audited results of what went on over the past 40 years in the S&P 500, and there is so much more green than red that the alternative or the opposition of this is almost a guaranteed loss. So if you are going to be an investor, you have to deal with the volatility to get the returns that you're looking at on the screen, which includes those 7 years that are not so fun, right? And maybe that's another conclusion of this. There's a down year of a little over 3%, and then a down year of a little over 4%. But the other 5 down years were essentially double digits all the way to something like a 2008, where you have a 37% downturn. Or, put another way, essentially 4 of every $10 that was invested in this index is temporarily unavailable to you. I understand how that can emotionally alter the way that you behave around investments, but that's why you got to zoom out, and that's why you want to look at this data set on the whole. It was then followed up by many positive years. And since then, we've actually only had 3 down years to the 15 that were so fantastic.
I completely agree. I mean, which makes me think, it was so funny because I was listening to, I listen and read financial news every single day, multiple times a day. And it's so interesting how obviously their job is to get eyeballs, right? And they know what hooks get people to pay attention. And so things like, I forget what the headline was, but it was basically like X, Y, and Z company has worst start. And like, that was it, right? And then you read like the article, it's like, since last month or something like that. Like the time frame, right, is not at all congruent with what the headline implies. And these are the things that then get caught in echo chambers and then hit us as investors. And by the way, Colin and I are human. We are not an exception to this. We have the same limbic system that everybody else has. This impacts us emotionally as well. But we have playbooks for it that we've been doing for decades that make it easier. It's never going to be easy, right? But wealth building should be simple, but it's not going to be easy. What comes to mind is working through frameworks. If you do the front-loaded work, it makes the job a lot easier. Never that it's going to be 100% easy. But let me share my my screen with you here, just so you guys know, like what we work with is not, and this is just my own personal notes. So I'll zoom out and zoom in if you guys can see it. You're not meant to see the text, so don't feel bad if you can't, right? So these are frameworks that the guys and I work through for investors to think through these things. So if I zoom in on one of these frameworks, let's go down to short, medium, and long term, right? There are protocols, right? So, okay, if we have a pot of money, right, with X, Y, and Z circumstances, right, what are we doing? How do we grow the money? How do we make the money? How do we save the money? How do we grow the money? How do we protect it? Okay, great. Well, then in each one of those categories, right, what's the time horizon? Okay, great. If the time horizon is this, the goal is this, okay, what kind of instruments are we going to use at a macro level? Okay, great. Well, from that macro level, okay, if we zoom into that, what are the options underneath the surface of the water that we have there? Now, there's pros and cons to all of those options, but when it's systematic, when it's structured, it's so much easier, right? Now, and then when you can understand, it's our job to teach you guys the mechanics of these things. There's no silver bullets, right? But it's this combination of getting the mechanics right and then also teaching you sufficiently so that it makes the plan tolerable. It's not that the plan is going to be like super enjoyable during those red markers, right, that Colin's referring to. Colin, what's your take on that? Using systematic playbooks, right, to help overcome maybe some of the psychological handicap and emotional handicap that we all have in the world of investing.
Yeah, it was a fantastic point. I think when it comes to something that can be so emotional, whether it's optimal for it to be emotional or not, having some sort of actionable fallback plan when the turbulence comes, not if it comes, right? When the turbulence comes, for you to level set and bring the conversation back to, oh, okay, I remember why we're investing this way, or I remember why we've structured it this way, or I remember that we actually did have a conversation and bake this into being part of my financial plan moving forward, is so much more beneficial than trying to react to things. And I think an easy way to highlight that, in hindsight, it's always relatively simple to say, like, oh, I should have made this move, right? But hindsight ignores the fact that something like a COVID, right, like a coronavirus, in the moment, you were scared that this novel virus might kill you, your family, your loved ones, or severely injure them, make them sick, whatever it might be. It's not so simple to pull the trigger on a big financial decision when there's something so novel going on in the world. And by the way, it has nothing to do with markets other than, obviously our reaction to it impacted or influenced the markets. So it wasn't something financial that set off that domino effect. It was a germ. If you don't have frameworks, if you don't have an actionable plan, if you don't have something to fall back on and rely on and walk you through why you made the prudent decision in the first place, it's a lot more plausible that you will blow up that plan, that you will have a knee-jerk reaction, that you will pivot and do something that might cost you big time, or maybe not big time, but big enough to where it hurts. A quick example of that, and we're working through a lot of this with our clients right now, is the amount of people that wish they would have done larger Roth conversions during COVID is like, again, yeah, that's easy to say in hindsight, but how about writing a big check for a tax bill on a conversion when the market was down 35%, and there, at the time at least, there was no end in sight. We had no idea of how deadly the virus could be, of how long the economy could be shut down, what our response rate would be, how long it would take science and medicine to figure it out, etc. It just looks obvious in hindsight. So again, I think that's why it's so important to have mental models, to have frameworks, to have structure, to have some sort of plan to fall back on, so that when the turbulence comes, when the unexpected comes, when the risk hits you, you can actually fall back and rest on your fundamentals and on your principles, as opposed to just trying to deal with it emotionally in the moment.
Let's explore a topic because
Hey Wes, I don't mean to interrupt you, but on that green and red chart that we were showing, the 40 years of returns of the S&P 500, in the early 2000s, 2000, 2001, 2002, there was 3 straight red years. What caused 3 straight down years? So the run up in the 90s of the tech companies and the internet boom really overvalued many companies in the index. So that was part of it. And as we were starting to recover, another big part of it was there was a large terrorist attack on our country, as we all remember, on 9/11, right? So that was also what was supposed to be a direct attack on our financial markets, on our economy, and the symbolism of that being hitting the trade centers, right? So not only the overvaluation of the tech sector, but also the terrorist attack on U.S. soil for the first time in decades was a large part of the reasoning there. And if either of you guys had something to add to that, I just wanted to make sure we answered that before we switch topics.
Oh, no, 100%. No, I think you answered it great. Something that Joel said, right, is the interplay of psychology and investing. So please don't sleep on this. If you look at defaults and the psychological literature around default, it's unbelievable. For the saving money portion, the subcategories of saving money, again, how do you build wealth? Make money, save money, grow money. Those are the 3 steps. Super simple. Well, the saving money portion is really hard. It's the bottleneck to the growing money. If we're not sending any money that we're making down to the growth level, you're never going to grow. And also, by the way, if we zoom up, if you don't make any money, despite what some financial books say of like, hey, just never drink Starbucks and you'll become a multi-millionaire when you're 970 years old, right? If you're not making money, right, you're not going to be able to grow because you don't have the seeds to grow. So if we look at the saving money portion, this is where default psychological literature is enormously important. If you look at the defaults of on versus off in organ donation, I think this is where the famous study was done. They did a study where, I guess in some places, organ donation, when you go to get your license, is defaulted to on, right? And you have to manually switch it off in the paperwork. Colin, how many percentage-wise, how many people do you think, right, turn it to on when the default is off, if that makes sense? So you want to be an organ donor. The default is no, Colin's not an organ donor unless he actually tells us he wants to be yes. What do you think that the conversion rate is?
I would guess less than 10%. I'm going to guess 4.
Yep, it's right around there. It's between 8 and 15%, right? Now, changing nothing other than the default. Turn it to default on. What do you think, how many people percentage-wise become organ donors at the end of that study?
Well, I would say it's at least the inverse of that, but probably better. Probably 90 to 95% of them are.
Yep, it's around 85%. You're spot on. Right now, those same humans now interplay in investing. They did the same studies with 401ks. 401k default's off, you have to opt in. Same thing, except for default is on. You don't have to opt in, you've got to opt out. Colin, what do you think the rates are?
Ooh. I guess it'd be something, probably something similar. Let's guess 9 out of 10.
100%. And then the inverse, right? 10% of people, right, versus 90% of people. All we're doing is we're changing the default. So when it comes, how does that impact you as the investor? If you can make the decision, ideally once or as minimally as possible, and I just worked with Dave on this, right? Let's do the front-loaded work to make the decisions. Then we turn the spigots on and automate it. So decide and automate and allocate. The more you can automate that, right, the more like we go down to the growing money portion. Sounds super simple when we talk about it, but it is not common practice. The amount of investors that I talk with where they keep on wanting to make the decisions. No, I want to, let's chat monthly so we can decide every time. Yeah, that sounds really good in practice, but in reality, on paper, but in reality, it doesn't play out. It just doesn't. Dave, I would love to get your take on that, because I love talking about this kind of stuff. What's your take?
Oh yeah, putting all your putting as much of your thinking power into the upfront decision is great. I think there's an automate, but I think there's a point where you still have to look at it.
Absolutely.
Right. But that's the key is, okay, well, when do I look at it? Once a year, every day? That's got to be part of the decision making process is when do you do that reevaluation?
Yep, no doubt about it. Like, so I'm glad you said that, because what I'm certainly not saying is just like, oh, throw away all judgment. Of course, right? Have proper feedback mechanisms, dashboards, et cetera, working with coaches, et cetera, where it's like, okay, we're going to be reasonable when we approach this data. One of the hardest parts about investing in stocks is that you have data in front of you every single second of the day, right? And it's hard to decipher signal versus noise. Totally get it, right? So that's why it's important to hop on calls like this and to work with professionals, et cetera. So with that being said, I think what often gets lost in investing, like we've talked about in the past, and we now have a super famous part of this show, which is, we don't even have a title for it, which is like, let's look at a single company. Because I have my licenses, I am not promoting this company by any stretch. We are just taking purely a little case study and like, hey, what do some of our investors own? Because the downside of just talking at high level index level, like, oh, S&P 500, Dow, NASDAQ, et cetera, is you start to lose the connection between what you're actually invested in. So we're going to explore Apple Computer today. And maybe Dave, from a boots on the ground perspective and an actual investor and a user of Apple, tell me how important or how much value Apple Computer maybe gives to you on a daily basis.
Well, I have a MacBook Pro, iPhone, an iPad. I use their products every single day. If I don't have them, if they're not working, then I'd have to go to another alternative and relearn in my brain, and my productivity takes a dip for a certain period of time. And then there's a time that's going to come back up to normal, but that is lost time and energy that I won't ever get back.
Love it. Colin, let me throw you the mic. How about you? How do you interface with Apple on a daily basis?
Yeah, well, tremendous value. I mean, again, own many of the products that Dave mentioned. AirPods go with me basically everywhere. I've got the watch on my wrist. One thing though, Wes, that I think you and I have talked about in the past, which I actually don't think these companies, Apple being, of course, a perfect example of it, get a lot of credit for, is like their stuff just works. Like, how often are you really dealing with like bugs or hiccups or malfunctions with your Apple products relative to how much are you using it, right? So like you can keep a MacBook Pro on like for a year. Yeah, you just keep the battery charged and you never have to like reboot that thing. Maybe once, like maybe one time. Pretty incredible, right? So yes, I think extreme value, and we've definitely talked about this, Wes. They've also added an element of design to it, of
Yep.
sleekness to it, that I also think is extremely underrated. But our subconscious tells us like that's why we're kind of attracted to it. Something as simple as like green bubbles versus blue bubbles. The blue bubble looks disproportionately better than that green bubble should. Like it shouldn't be that big of a difference, but they've done it. Including like their wearables, everything looks like it's trendy, sporty, sleek. It all looks like it's designed together. Yeah, I think they've done a fantastic job on delivering value in kind of a multi-pronged way.
Yeah, and for this purpose, we're going across age groups right now, right? Joel like is representative. No, really, like my mother's representative of a certain demographic.
Right.
She is not a tech person at all, but she uses her iPhone every single day. My grandmother is able to use an Apple phone to a certain degree. Now, to be fair, when I FaceTime with her, she still puts it like up to her ear. But we still connect. So what it gives to me is a portal to my family back on the East Coast. Like legitimately, I know that sounds weird, but I think that's often what happens is we get pretty cold about public companies because they become the Goliath. And like there's something sort of like confrontational about that, like, oh, the big, the big brother, all these things. But it's like, no, wait a second. How does it deliver value to all of us on a daily basis? Joel, how about you? What is the most valuable way you use these devices?
Well, so you low key called me old. That's fine. But
That was Colin's idea.
oh, yeah, it was. I know he does it daily. So, but my point was before you ever made the comment was they got the entire boomer generation to default to Apple products. Why? Because it's mindless. It's easy to use, right? I watch people, some of my golf buddies have Samsung phones. I watch the gymnastics they have to go through, and I've never used one, so I really can't say that it's easy, hard or easy, but they have to go through some serious gymnastics to get to the places they get to. There's none of that with Apple. They just made it so mindless. And now most of us probably use 5% of the capabilities of those phones, but we don't care. We think it's very easy and just kind of it's just a default like no brainer. And
Yep,
that's the
100%.
genius of it. That's the genius of it. And I don't use the Apple computers. I just have the phone and the watch. But I'm assuming that if I took 10 minutes to try and transition over, I would find the same thing.
Yeah, so let's zoom in. Now that we've sort of set the stage of how it actually impacts us, let's actually zoom in on some high-level financials. And then if we break down their company, which I think is really fascinating, like let's see how that actually goes. Now I could only get this Sankey chart for 2023. I'm an enormous fan of Sankey charts. It kind of, simplifies data. So if we look, you can sort of see how the flow is, right, of Apple's revenue, et cetera. Like, okay, what are they making from iPhone revenue relative to MacBook revenue in 2023 versus iPad versus wearables, et cetera. So I feel like guys like, Dave and David could really appreciate this. You can actually see the flow. Now, what's not depicted on here, which is the connective tissue between all of these devices. If you think, and it was Joel or Colin who said the ecosystem, I think it was Colin, the ecosystem, in my view, is what makes Apple incredibly unique. I mean, I use the AirPods, MacBook, iPad, and iPhone. I also use Apple Pay, which we'll get into a second, right? I use their apps on there. All of this connective tissue, and Steve Jobs, his vision was to actually make tools that you didn't even notice, that you'd only notice if you stop using them. You say, oh, shoot, I forgot my AirPods on a flight. It's going to be a miserable flight, right? Oh my gosh. I mean, imagine what you would do, Colin, if a taxi cab drove away with your iPhone.
So, well, you were with me. Remember when you were dropping me off at the airport and you stopped your car after pulling away and you're like, hey, you probably want these? And it was my AirPods. Yeah, I was 5 minutes away from dropping $200 in an airport vending machine on some headphones. Yeah. So I have done that before. I have incentivized the cab drivers, the Uber drivers, to come back and say, hey, I will give you $50 if you just bring my phone back to me. It's happened to me twice. It's been a long time since that happened. But nonetheless, I had to incentivize them to come across town and drop my phone off because I think Dave made the comment about his mother, who uses an iPhone, maybe to different extents here, but it's a lifeline to in a lot of ways. The notes that I have, the passwords I have saved, the financial information that's on there, obviously contacts, and easy access to all of our clients and all of the people that I need to talk to on a daily basis. Being able to communicate so efficiently and so quickly in so many different ways, it makes it such a sticky company. And you talk about durability when investing in a company. How many people are likely to abandon ship when they're as deep in it as you are, Wes, with the wearables, with the phone, with the computers or the iPads, etc. It's pretty hard to it's hard to upend that. You have to. It's a pretty big directional shift on the tech stack that you're using, like the actual hardware at least, right? So just a fascinating look at all of the ways that they think about retaining customers once they get them.
Well, I mean, let's explore this idea. If we all go to sort of like innovation corner and think through some things, I have a hypothesis. Again, it's not a prediction, right? But I have a hypothesis. If we think about AI and we look at ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera, and on down the list, think about, okay, well, how would we interface with that on a regular basis? I would be shocked if Apple doesn't have a severe advantage, even if they don't create their own AI. Well, guess what? If you look at what Meta is looking to do right now, what are they doing? They're trying to create a wearable, glasses. They're starting to look somewhat normal-ish, and they're trying to like pay influencers to wear these things. And you just feel like these influencers are like, oh my gosh, yeah, sure, I'll take the $100,000 check, but like these things just look ridiculous on my face. So that tech's not there yet. But let's even say they nail it. Let's say they nail the wearables of the eyeglasses. Okay, but you're still going to use your phone, right? You're still going to have a watch, most likely. You're still going to have AirPods, etc. And then what happens? Again, now I love Meta. I'm not saying I love Facebook as a company, Meta technically, but I try to think of like, okay, well, if Apple also made glasses, I think it's a pretty high probability that they're better looking, right? And always they release incredible technologies that just works. Now I have an entire AI ecosystem. So I could talk to my watch, I could talk to my AirPods, I could talk to my glasses. Again, in the future, if they make them, I could talk to my phone, I could talk to my iPad, I could talk to to my computer. I could talk to my Apple TV. I could talk to my Apple speaker. Do you see how, like, what other company, again, just from a user perspective, I don't know of any other company that has that ecosystem, Colin. What do you, what's your
Yeah.
take?
No, I think you're spot on. I think it's very, very difficult. I wonder, I think it's a great thought experiment. I truly wonder how motivated they are to create like their own AI. Of course, that would be super beneficial to the company, but maybe they just take some of the, well, I think not too long ago, they came out and made a deal with Google where Gemini is essentially going to replace Siri. So
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about it. Yeah, we can insert the software or the technological advancements in AI into any of the hardware that Apple already has the dominant stance on. That's, in my opinion, less. I think it's less sticky to try to be a ChatGPT fighting against a Google Gemini than it is to be, in Meta's position trying to fight against overthrowing the wearable king, right, or the device king, which Apple obviously is doing very well in currently.
Yeah, Joel, what's your take about all that, about the ecosystem and the power of it potentially?
Yeah, so I said I only had two Apple products. I just totally overlooked. I actually have four. So I only mentioned 50% of the products I have. I have the phone, I have the watch, I have the iPad, and I have the AirPods. I just took it for granted that
Yep,
so much
exactly.
that I even forgot that I was using them. So yeah, so I think it's a tremendous point.
Yeah, and now I think a dramatically under talked about capability of Apple is their financial services arm. If you think, and let me pull this up on the screen, if you guys have ever used this, um, you know, Apple Cash, Apple Wallet, Apple Pay, and now they actually have an Apple Card. So now they're partnering with financial institutions to accomplish this. But again, talking about the ecosystem, I don't know about you guys, but I have not pulled out my wallet in I don't know how long. I literally pay through my watch. Like I double click on my watch, I put it down to the little thingy majig, and then it says, you know, you've got no money in your bank account. But it pays through this mechanism. That's crazy. I've gotten onto airplanes with this, right? Where the QR code or whatever is on my watch, I put it down to the little scanner piece, and I get on the airplane. That's how deep the ecosystem is, to the degree where Joel, it's used so much in his life where he forgets it. I mean, that's crazy. And by the way, me too. I think Apple financial services arm is really slept on right now. And again, this is not a recommendation, full disclaimer, yada, yada, yada. But it's so deep under the surface that we're not very present to it. Dave, being a consultant, do you use Apple products? If so, which ones? And if so, how much?
Pretty across the board, similarly that you shared. I converted when I started grad school back in when I was 25, and like I remember it being hard to get to figure it out because I'm like, where is the right click, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Just
yeah.
getting that adoption. But once you're in, like it's hard to get out of it. It's pretty fundamental to all of my work, and like you're saying, like the fact that like your Apple Watch is connected and whatnot. Like I can walk into any. I remember like having to go into client meetings and having to bring like an entire kit with adapters and everything. It's like I don't have to bring anything. I walk in, I'm like, I'm gonna connect, and like I don't have any issues. I'm not worried
Yep.
about it. Like I can do my work.
Oh yeah, I mean the evolution of Apple has been amazing. If you look back at their original products to now, I mean it's off the charts. It's unbelievable. I mean almost to the degree. So let me ask you this, Colin, do you feel? Could you see how people could have an emotional attachment to a tech company called Apple, right? Like I feel a certain way with Apple. Versus if you ask me again, I'm not this is not a negative on any other company. I don't necessarily feel an emotional attachment or any sort of emotion when I say Microsoft. Maybe Microsoft Excel. I apologize. Let's remove Microsoft Excel, like the company of Microsoft or Google. I don't feel like no emotions come up there, but I'd be lying if I didn't say like Apple. Like I think about like, oh man, I almost have like there's a connection there. Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah, I don't mean to genderize the conversation, but I've had many female friends, acquaintances, etc., in the past talk about how it actually bothers them when they have to text somebody that isn't an Apple user. Like the aesthetics of
Yeah.
the text chain really legitimately bother them, right? So I mean I think it's definitely true of certainly people anecdotally that I've just I've talked to in the past.
Yeah, 100%. Joel, any final words of wisdom, buddy?
Well, I said I threatened my Nick Saban story, so I think this
Oh,
fits
yes.
here a little bit. So I was on a coaching call the other day where one of the guys that was on the call knew, there's an author that is writing a new book. Nick Saban is a chapter in that book. So part of he got a little inside scoop on what Nick Saban talked about. And one of the things that he mentioned was when Nick Saban was coaching Alabama, he said he had all of his guys go out, and when they were recruiting for the year, they all went out and they knew every single five-star recruit that existed in the country, right?
Mm.
He said that's not the hard part. We had then on top of that, they had film on every single five-star recruit in the company or in the country and of their entire high school career. And then he said, well, what do you do with that? Do you look for the way that they react to certain plays, how they handle situations on the field? And Nick Saban watched every single piece of film, every play on every five-star recruit. And the only thing he looked for basically was how did they react when they made a mistake?
Mm.
How did they come
Awesome.
off the field? How did they react to their teammates? Did they get in a fight or an argument with their coach? Did they throw their helmet when they got off the field? He said they can all play football. They can all play at Alabama. There's no question that all these people are athletic enough to do it. The question is when something goes wrong, how do they react to it? And are they Alabama quality football in the way they react to a negative event? That was
Absolutely love it. It
amazing.
reminds me of this model of mental resilience and emotional resilience. How quickly can you get back to baseline, right? And do you overreact to a negative stimulus? Because all of that overreaction is wasted space, and in the investment life, it could kill your portfolio.
Tiger Woods said basically the same thing. He said he gave himself 10 steps after a bad shot.
Mm,
Once he took that 10th step, that shot's gone. He's on to the next shot.
love it.
Yeah.
Colin, final words of wisdom, buddy.
Oh, that's a cool way to look at it. That resilient buoyancy of like, hey, how quickly do you get back to baseline? I like that. Yeah, great story. Great story. I don't know that I have a ton of additional wisdom here other than it's been a heck of a year. We really appreciate it. Full calendar year of roundtables in the books. Obviously, you guys made that happen. As we send off here, obviously, happy holidays to everybody. We'll be talking to many of you, if not by the end of the year, shortly after. But we'll be back and ready for roundtables come January.
Yeah, it's big heartfelt thank you to you guys. I mean, sincerely, just on a personal level, super honored to fight by everybody's side. You guys allow me personally to do what I love every single day, and I know I can speak for the guys and Shelly and Brittany and the whole team over here at Atikan. Sincerely, happy holidays. Also, a bit of a nerd reminder, end of year, keeping your vision, your taxes. If you have any assets or operating at losses, you might want to consider selling off some for tax loss harvesting. If you have any questions on that, just give us a call. The great thing about being so profitable this year from the markets, et cetera, is, you get to increase the size of your portfolio, your net worth. The downside, though, is like you don't have many losses to offset any gains, but you might have those in other asset classes that maybe you own outside of Atikan. So I'm not a CPA, again, disclaimer, but like I would, just peek at that. If you want to talk to us or me about that, just give me a call and we can go through it together. Anyway, love you guys. Thank you so much, Dave.
Thank
Again,
you, everyone.
welcome to the team, buddy. It's an honor to have you, and we'll see you guys later.
Thank you guys for all you do for us.
Hey, have a great day. Thank you,
Merry
David.
Christmas.
Merry
Bye.
Christmas.
Merry Christmas.